So thank you very much, Charles, and thanks everybody for being still here. I'm talking about innovative forms of networked tax governance to regulate tax competition, which is a paper written by Professor Carlo Garbarino, and I will go through it. The agenda will be, first of all, giving some common grounds of definition, just to go all together in the same direction, then explain you how tax competition is influenced by this enlarged tax governance, and how it how we can contribute with tax governance to create a defensive structure against harmful tax competition. Network governance are a set of items that are called nodes, which are connected among them. This is a very basic definition of that, and in taxes, we know that all the actors that are involved in tax policy. So we can consider all the actors that are involved in tax policies as nodes of this network of governance. The first and clearest networked governance is the intergovernmental cooperation. So, which is the normal set of chief executives of countries that meet together and decide things together. The outcome of this is the tax treaty web that we all know. Then we have a slightly more innovative concept, which is the trans-governmental cooperation, which involves the subunits of the government. So all the agencies of the government and the treasury and revenues, they form these trans-governmental nets. And then we have transnational cooperation, which includes, it's a more enlarged way to see cooperation between countries, and includes all the non-state actors, including the NGOs, for example, and every actor which is independent from the state. And these can be called epistemic communities, and in a way, they operate in a parallel way, both internally between them, so because they have this structure of a net inside them, and externally, because they are often connected to each other. And this creates our epistemic nets. And just plural constitutionalism instead can be defined as a web of governments which act in a hierarchy. So this is the most notable example of this is the European Union. The European Union is based on the fact that there are various sites of authority which are involved in a creation of norms, but they are all at the same level. There is no a ranked organization, and they have a common ground of legitimacy, a common grammar of legitimacy, to understand, to take decisions and to make decisions and understand each other. The Glocal connections involve all these last three elements that we mentioned. So trans-governmental nets, the revenues, epistemic nets, which are the non-state actors, and plural constitutionalism, which is a way to interact with each other. And this creates these Glocal connections because they can enlarge the way decisions are made, passing from bilateralism to multilateralism. That is something that is slowly happening, but not as fast as we wish. Therefore, what we need are multiple actors, so governments, trans-governmental nets, and epistemic nets, connections among these nodes, and information that can flow around. So any kind of information that flows from one node to another is what we are looking for. And this creates a regulatory framework for tax competition that is enlarged and does not involve anymore only direct decision from a state which has its own interests, but a governance system of interconnected nodes. Therefore, we include the interactions between states and states, states and non-state actors, and non-state actors, which is very important according to our opinion. This creates two ways of making decisions, with the traditional way that leads to the formal agreements, and the local network relationships, which includes all our broader factors. I will skip this, I'm sorry, just to be on. So we wish to have the establishment of a new network, of a new tax governance, a new order, which is complementary to the existing one. So what we wish to have is governments, tax courts, tax administration, and non-state actors to act together and to involve and to create connections between them and to cooperate on specific functions as taxes. So the research question is basically if these transgovernmental nets, epistemic nets, and plural constitutionalism can help to solve the problem of harmful tax competition. So we saw from our experience, our very recent experience, that the OECD, which includes 3 different networks, has to some extent brought transgovernmentalism. In particular, we have the OECD Council, the Center for Tax Policy Administration, and the CFA, the Committee on Fiscal Affairs. The Council has an hybrid structure, so it's both a hierarchy and the network. But the CTPA, it's what we can define a transgovernmental net. So tax administration come together and make decisions together. The CFA is even more interesting because it creates a transgovernmental network, but at the same time, it brings together not only tax officials, but also experts from member and observer countries of the OECD, which is something that we really appreciated. And these tax policy groups, basically the CFA, can be defined also as an epistemic community to some extent. I will skip the G20, although I'll just tell you that it has these very important functions as well, like syndicating, endorsing, and make orchestration of the policies. So the most important thing is to legitimize policies that are created by those transgovernmental nets. And so what transgovernmentalism can bring is the collaboration in an entity such as the CTPA, but it doesn't have necessarily to be the OECD, of course. But what we would like to see is to have a connection with the NGOs and with the other non-state actors in order to have vehicles of ideas that affect tax outcomes. This can be operated, so epistemic nets can operate together with transgovernmental nets, as we saw, and this will bring to a very important outcome, which is glocalization in tax policy. So basically having, at a global level, the ideas on what we want to reach, which is organized through the governments and the transgovernmental nets, but at the same time, have the idea on how to implement that at a local level. So basically, the adaptation of what the policy is to specific cultures. So both global and local level of tax policy. And also, we wondered about the networked plural constitutionalism and its role in the elaboration of, in addressing harmful tax competition. And in this case, we saw the example of the European Union as the main one. As the European Union creating this idea of tax dumping, which they realize being negative for themselves. So the European Union stated that tax dumping is negative and that they wanted to address this issue. Therefore, one of the basic ideas in plural constitutionalism is that we have to substitute tax harmonization with tax coordination, which is basically more effective. And this creates advantageous solutions. If we look at what the EU has done, they basically go through 3 dimensions. Intra-EU, so among states, how states operate with each other. EU inbound, so EU vis-a-vis what are the other non-EU investors that are coming in the EU, and the EU outbound policies. And as we saw, one of the main examples is that the intra-EU dimension was very important, and it solved several problems of tax avoidance being coordinating all together. And one of the main examples is basically ATAD, in which we have, thanks to this defensive coalition, we have the introduction in all the European Union member countries of interest limitation rules, exit taxes, and general anti-abuse rules. Just to conclude, another idea that the EU is approaching is CCCTB, which probably is the best coordinated EU approach that they could think of. And therefore, our idea is that looking at the EU as plural constitutionalism, we believe that this system can be adopted elsewhere, and that it can be very effective in defending against this problem of harmful tax competition. Thank you all very much for your attention.